Good evening, everybody. I start by conveying to you all, and in particular to Aida, Hani and Noha, my deepest condolences for the sudden departure of Jim Graff, who has been a friend of the Palestinian cause, a strong supporter and advocate for human rights, and I'm sure that we will be missing him in the coming years. The title that I chose for my presentation is The Myth of Palestinian Economic Development and State Building Under Israeli Occupation. I start by giving you a brief view of the economic conditions now in Palestine, where the collapse of the Palestinian economy has been the major cause of suffering during this intifada in particular. The GDP has declined by about 1/3. Investment has declined by 90%. While there is no food shortage in Palestine, yet people are suffering from malnutrition. Tourism, which was supposed to be the largest productive sector, has almost collapsed. Unemployment is still more than 25%. It's worse in Gaza than in the West Bank. Half of the population live below the official poverty line of $2 per day. Subsistence poverty is estimated as 16%. The number of Palestinian workers in Israel has dropped from 160,000 to less than 25,000. Daily income losses are estimated at about $7 million per day. Israel has adopted a very well orchestrated strategy to dominate the Palestinian economy. The Palestinian territory is a captive market for Israeli products. Israel restricts Palestinian imports. It controls borders and ports of entry. It controls the movement of labor. It controls the disbursement of taxes to the PNA. Thus, Israel has been using the Palestinian economy as a lever through which it will exert pressure on the Palestinians to get concessions. The term de-development was coined by Sarah Roy, and it's very clear what does that mean. Palestinians now have limited access to a large portion of the natural resources. Population densities is high when you take into consideration these limitations. And the division of Palestinian land into ghettos and into areas A, B, and C has produced two different and parallel planning schemes, one serving the occupier and one for the Palestinians. What the Palestinians have seen during the past 14 years since the peace process started is that we have been going through peace in pieces. In 1994, following the Declaration of Principles, the Gaza-Jericho Agreement was signed, which gave the Palestinians control over 75% of Gaza plus Jericho. This was followed by the Oslo Agreement, where the Palestinian land was divided into areas A, B, and C. Areas E comprises the main cities like Nablus, Ramallah, Bethlehem, and they represent 3%, and we have full control over these areas. 22% is area B, which is shown here in green, and these are where Palestinians have only civil responsibilities. The rest is area C. Following this agreement, Rabin was killed, and it took about 2 years before negotiations resumed, and the agreement with Netanyahu was signed at the Y River, giving us more area A in the north of the West Bank. And this was followed later by the Sharm el-Sheikh agreement, where we got more area A until reaching the 18% area A, 22% area B, but still 60% is area C. Well, according to Oslo, the West Bank and Gaza territory should have come under the jurisdiction of the Palestinian Council in a phased manner to be completed within 18 months from the date of the inauguration of the Council. So our leaders were saying Jerusalem and settlements are final status issues that represent 5%. So we will be getting 95% by November of the West Bank by November 1995. But instead of that, we, until 2000, we did not get more than 18, 22, and 60, A, B, and C. And if the same pattern would have continued, we will be another 200 years before we get to the 95%. Now the situation is even worse because Israel has reoccupied the main cities, and we have now control over partially Tulkarem and Jericho. So only 7% plus Gaza is under the Palestinian control, and 93% is under Israeli control. The greatest failure of the peace process is that it did not stop the Israeli colonization project. Although Article 31 of the interim agreement says that neither side shall initiate or take any step that will change the status of the West Bank and Gaza Strip pending the outcome of permanent status negotiations. Between January 2002 and August 2004, Israel constructed more than 15,000 housing units in the West Bank. The targeted governorates were Jerusalem, where 50% of these housing units were built, and Bethlehem, where about 1/3 were added. That's why the term de-Palestinization of Jerusalem has now been coined, where in May 2004, Israel issued tenders to build 2,210 tenders. Hardly work has started when in August another 1,039 units were approved to be built, additional. And in 2005, an additional 6,040 new housing units have been tendered for the construction. Altogether, about 10,000 units will be built for about 45,000 settlers to be added into the East Jerusalem and change the demography so that Jerusalem will be de-Palestinized. Jerusalem will be surrounded by a wall. In March 2005, plans for an additional 3,500 units in Ma'al Adumim have been added, and in April the Israeli government approved a plan to start Givat Yael, which is a new settlement in Walaja that will link Gilo with the Gush Atzion block and will have 55 settlers in the next 5 years. If we look at the settlement expansion since the 1967 occupation, we will notice two distinct periods of extensive settlement activity. The first one took place after the signing of the Camp David Accords between Egypt and Israel, where the settlers from Sinai were moved and brought into the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. This happened during Begin era, and now we witness another era under Sharon, which coincided with the disengagement plan from Gaza.